Uvalde, Texas, and out in Buffalo, New York, we as March for Our Lives have decided that it was imperative for us to take to the streets again and march for our lives. So for some brief background as to who we are as an organization, we were born in 2018 after the high schoolers in Stoneman Douglas quickly took to the streets to mobilize and organize, but we didn't stop there. In the 4 years since, we have become a courageous youth-led movement dedicated to promote civic engagement, education, and direct action by youth to eliminate the epidemic of gun violence. So what sets us aside from most of the other gun violence prevention organizations and what drives our movement is the theory of change. The belief that we, as a March for Our Lives community, as a member of the fight for social justice, as a person who believes that we can create a world free of gun violence. The beliefs that we all share. We believe that in order to achieve the vision and save lives, we need something more bold, transformative than gun violence or gun control alone. While fighting gun violence, we take a holistic approach, look right into the root causes of this crisis. We are all interested in forming all types of gun violence, from mass shootings to everyday violence, police violence, and more. Building a world where the need for guns is obsolete. We call for a world reimagined, a world where oppressive power structures are abandoned and community is embraced, a world where human needs are met and the love of people is centered. Gun violence doesn't just happen on its own. There are deeper systems that are fed into it and have gotten us to the state of gun violence epidemic that we are in today. So we cannot address gun violence without addressing its root causes. We believe that there are 5 societal forces that are fueling the gun violence epidemic, and we can make an impact in these key areas if we can, we can make an impact in these key areas, we can get closer to a world where gun violence is obsolete. So the signs right here in the front are kind of the 5 societal forces if you guys want to follow along, like looking at the signs with me. So the first one should be right here on the right, is gun glorification. So in American culture, we put guns on a pedestal, and we believe that we can derive power and safety from guns. This is why it is easier to get a gun than life-saving medication, food stamps, or even a home in the United States. The ease of access we have to guns and the violence that ensures from this is directly a result of the American culture and how they place, is a direct result of the American culture places towards them. So much so as to associate owning a gun with being American. We need to replace the idea of owning a gun and being American with being American and loving each other. Thank you. The second one is armed supremacy. This means that using guns as a threat of violence to reinforce power structures and the hierarchies. This is exactly how white supremacy and patriarchy survive and thrive. Anytime that we see a police officer brutalize a black woman, a person of color, someone who is disabled, that is armed supremacy in action. Domestic violence is another very common form of armed supremacy. Guns arm these oppressive structures, and these structures are what fuel gun violence. The third is political apathy and corruption. A democracy is where power comes from the people, and overwhelmingly and bipartisan majority of Americans support basic solutions to curb access to guns. Yet politicians are not doing anything to effectively end or even acknowledge the gun violence epidemic because of their close ties to the NRA.
Vote them out.
Both parties were invited here today. I sent emails personally to each and every person in the school board, each and every person in my state representatives, and only one side show up today. Jennifer Jenkins will be speaking here today, so you will get to hear from her in a bit. We have Moms Demand Action in the back, Counselors for Change, Just recognize who shows up for what you guys believe in today, because those are the only people that are here and are supporting what you also support. So politicians continually turn a blind eye to the tens of thousands of Americans dying of gun violence each year because they are just playing a political game with our lives. People become apathetic because shootings keep happening and nothing is done, but we cannot and will not stop fighting. We need to continue mobilizing, just like in 2020 when we helped nearly 2 million young voters turn out at the polls and achieve a record-breaking turnout. And here we are in the midterms when we can do it all over again. Sorry this is long, guys, but it all has to be said. Yeah. So poverty as a root cause, we're almost done. This is what I think is one of the most important points too. So the communities that struggle most with the endemic gun violence are those that have been purposely and systematically denied access to services that can provide them with education, social programs, or even basic human needs. The intentional denial of these resources by the state has left these communities with few opportunities over several generations. Guns fill the gaps in these communities where resources are lacking and contribute to gun violence when the communities really need to band together and fight these oppressive systems. Guns are a consequence of the impacts of segregation, racism, generational trauma, and poverty. The last one is going to be the national mental health crisis as one of the root causes. Millions of Americans struggle with undiagnosed, untreated mental health illness or neurodivergency in a vastly ignored mental health service crisis that is only ever addressed to draw attention away from the need for more regulations on those who can access firearms. Yes. Those experiencing mental illness and neurodivergence are among those most likely to become victims of gun violence or to die from self-inflicted gun injuries. People with neurodivergence or mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by police. In all U.S. suicides, firearms are used more than half of the time. This crisis is a manifestation and culmination of all the previous forces we mentioned. Our amazing speakers are here lined up and will help me further energize and inspire you guys on this journey to ending gun violence once and for all. So next up I do have Amelia Curran. She is a sophomore from Melbourne High School, here to shine a light on what it was like to grow up in the aftermath of so many school shootings, a world she's only ever known. So give it up for Amelia.
Hello everyone. I'm here to talk about my experiences growing up in a world where gun violence and specifically school shootings have been an epidemic and have very, very much impacted our youth. So, as Carly said, my name is Amelia. I just graduated my sophomore year of high school at Mel High. I took the SAT last Saturday. I went to prom in April. I will be celebrating my 16th birthday next week with some of my most cherished friends. These experiences will influence my identity and character for the rest of my life. However, so many kids each year do not get to make these memories. They do not get prom. They do not get to make lifelong friends. They do not get to find their identity during one of the most puzzling yet rewarding times of their lives. They do not get this, all because their lives were cut short due to gun violence. According to the National Gun Violence Archive, there have been 254 mass shootings this year, 27 of which being school shootings. Not even halfway through this year yet, 735 children aged 0 through 17 have died due to gun violence, and almost 2,000 children have been injured. Gun violence disproportionately affects communities of poverty and people of color as well. We are here today to mourn the victims of the Uvalde, Buffalo, and Parkland shootings and demand our legislators bring lasting change to ensure that these tragedies will never happen again. Gun violence has touched the lives of almost everyone here, whether it be a friend who passed due to these tragedies or a terrifying lockdown. Too many children have had their lives cut short due to gun violence. We must pass the ban on semi-automatic weapons. We must have stricter gun control laws. And we must bring change, for our children's lives depend on it. I remember recently a shelter-in-place occurred at my school. This is when there is police activity in the area, but there's not an active shooter, so you just go into shelter-in-place, not a lockdown. I was in the hallways coming back from my guidance counselor when I heard that announcement. I had to run into one of the bathroom stalls, and I stood on the seat so no one could see me. And only a couple minutes after that, my best friend, who actually goes to a different school than me, almost 5 miles away, frantically texted me asking if I was okay. Despite this only being a shelter-in-place, me and many other students were frightened for our lives. This incident not only terrified students at my school, but other students in the district, like my best friend. A popping chip bag in the lunchroom or a firework in the distance is enough to bring a crowd of hundreds of bustling students to a dead silence. This should not be the new normal, though it unfortunately is. Another incident happened while I was in middle school. My school was near a Wells Fargo, and one day there was a robbery at this bank. This was early in the morning, before school had started, and I remember sitting with my best friend on the benches in front of our school. The administrators hurried us all inside, and we huddled in the corner of a classroom until the threat had passed. This occurs too often in schools in America. We should not be instilling fear into our children's hearts at 9 a.m. just so they can have an education. Yeah. Schools have increasingly become a place of fear and tragedy rather than an environment to learn and grow. Our curriculum has become ducking from bullets and barricading the door, preparing for a test we hope will never come. Parents, teachers, students, and children, we should not have to worry about the threat of gun violence plaguing our classrooms. We should not have to worry about lockdowns and escape routes, Kevlar backpacks and barricades. We should not have to worry about the gates that surround every school and even having a school resource officer. And we will not have to worry about this as long as we keep fighting for gun control.
Ever public speaking, by the way, so this is like really big. I totally convinced her super last minute too to come and speak. I feel like this is just such a great opportunity for young voices to be heard, so anything I can do to amplify that would be great. So next up I do have Miss Jennifer Jenkins. She is on the school board and she just has a little bit to share with you guys.
Hello everyone, good morning, good morning. So Carly asked me to be here today, and as much as I appreciate the invite to speak, I hate being here. I do. I really hate being here. I attended this march as simply a concerned citizen, a mom, an educator, right after the tragedy in Parkland that our amazing students put together. And I find myself being invited here 4 years later for the same conversation. Why? Why the hell am I here? Why the hell do we all have to be here again? I'll tell you why. Every county-wide and statewide elected official in Brevard County was invited to attend here today. Not one is here. Why? Why are they not here?
They don't want to answer.
What could possibly be less partisan than keeping our children safe? don't agree on how we get there, you can put on your shoes, you can show up, and you can listen to the concerned voices of your community. Because at the very minimum, you can agree we need to reduce senseless gun violence. For the past year and a half, I have listened relentlessly to a loud minority of voices screaming about their parental rights. Well, what about yours? What about mine? What about my parental right to walk my 5-year-old daughter to kindergarten and not have to think about the fact that there is only one law enforcement officer on her entire campus standing in the crosswalk, as a swarm of children head towards a wide open gate, a false sense of security, 5 foot tall, that can easily be climbed or jumped, waving goodbye to her as she walks across a wide open field towards her classroom on the other side of campus. An open campus whose classroom doors are outside and rely on an individual's memory to lock it from the outside, wondering if I'll regret being frustrated that she took too long to eat her Fruity Pebbles or put on her shoes on her right feet, regret not keeping her home because of the imaginary sickness she made up for the 10th time that month, or regret not hugging her long enough, sincerely enough before I let her go. Before I let her go and leave her in the hands of a place she's supposed to be safe, secure, and free to learn, laugh, and play. What about my parental rights to take her to school every single day and know she will be coming home in the afternoon? Just like so many parents here today and across our county and across this nation, I was terrified to take my daughter to school the day after Uvalde. Terrified. Spoke with my educator husband, maybe we should just keep her home. It's the last day of school. Is it worth it? What has allowed my rights to be less important than the ease of someone to legally access a weapon that can fire dozens of bullets in seconds to rip apart our children's bodies? Yes, as elected officials, we serve to represent our community's concerns. But I argue that ultimately, we serve to represent our community's values. But what does not one other county or statewide elected official being here today say about their values? Because I know my community's values. I know that a majority of my community believes in common sense gun laws. I know that a majority of my community believes arming staff members and teachers is not the solution. I know a majority of my community believes that the murder of 19 children and 2 teachers is more than enough to demand a change. So I ask you, vote for your values. For the love of God, vote for your values. Not for your party. I feel confident that our community values our children's freedom over those of a loud minority. The freedom to live, learn, and play, to remain innocent, naive, and delicate, and to know that the adults in the room are taking care of them. Today, we are not just marching for our lives, we are marching for all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. All right, next, probably gonna be my favorite speaker. This is Miss Addysin. You wanna come over here? Addysin, I got to meet today for the first time in person. She is, how many years old are you?
8.
And she's gonna share with you guys a little speech she wrote. Here's this. You're gonna stand here.
Yay, Addysin.
Hi, my name is Addysin. I am 8 years old. I'll be starting 4th grade in August. I am also a Girl Scout, and in May, I received the President's Gold Volunteer Service Award. I was 4 in a VPK classroom when I had my first lockdown drill to ensure my safety against the hands of a gunman. I learned to lock the door, turn off the lights, and hide in a classroom before I learned to read. I didn't know what was going on, but my teacher ordered me to do as she says. I had no idea that we would learn to hide from a deranged person with an assault rifle before we knew our colors. That this person could be patrolling my school at any moment to see if there's any innocent lives ready to be taken away. They trust my teacher to have a gun in her desk, but they don't trust her to pick out which book I'll read in class. Do you think when my teacher was going to school to be a teacher, she ever thought she would have to use her body to protect her students one day? No. I'll be 9 next month, and I've never known a time without gun violence, without school shootings. I've never gone to school and not feared that I might not go home. This is the normal here in America. In 2016, my mom lost a friend to gun violence. The husband legally obtained a gun and murdered his wife, 3 kids aged 8, 5, and 2, and a family dog before taking his own life. If we had stricter gun laws that wouldn't let someone with a domestic violence on their record get a gun, they would still be here. We need more background checks because all you have to do in Texas, to get a gun is have an ID, fill out one form, and have cash. But if you want to sell a taco, you have to have 10 permits. We need our lawmakers to take action on things that matter instead of banning me from seeing a drag queen. Maybe make my school safe. Make the grocery store safe. Here's a list of things that is harder to get than an assault rifle in Florida. A driver's license, solar panels, voter registration card, a marriage license, an abortion, birth control, health care, and it is much easier to get an assault rifle than it is to get mental health treatment. And if that isn't enough for you, here are some of our current laws. Safe storage requirements, 14 states. Assault weapons ban, 8 states. And required safety courses, 6 states. BBC News published a report showing the difference in gun laws of the US and other countries. The percentage of gun-related homicides, 79% in the US in 2020, 37% in Canada, 13% in Australia, and 4% in the UK. Uvalde, Texas is now the 8th worst mass shooting in the US since 1991. Pulse is second. This weekend marks the 6 years since Pulse, when a hateful man walked into my friend Brandon's safe place and took away his best friends, Juan and Drew. This weekend, we remember the 49. I ask you all to do something to honor the 49 beautiful souls we lost that day. It's so heartbreaking to me that there will never be a single school day when I won't be afraid. Over the last 2 decades, more school-aged children have died from guns on the duty police officers and active duty military combined. For decades, auto accidents have been the leading cause of death among children. But in 2020, guns were the #1 cause. Shameful. My friends and I want to still be alive when we go to college. What if the kids that are asking for change are the answer to your thoughts and prayers, and you're just not listening to us? Thank you.
she phenomenal? All right, we have one more speaker up, and his name is Jamie Tarkowski. Some of you may know him, he's a local. I feel like I don't even know what to say to introduce you besides that. Right Love in Her Arms founder, number of other things, but I'm sure he'll take it away.
Thank you, Carly. You guys give it up for Addysin again. That was amazing. Addysin, you are really, really special. Do you know that? I think you might. Do you want to be president? I think you would be a good president. Thank you to Carly for organizing this once again. I echo what Jennifer said. I spoke at the event 4 years ago and wish we didn't have to be here this morning. And also, I don't know if this is like an elephant in the room, but for those of us that were present 4 years ago, there were more people here. And I think it's okay to be disappointed that in a town with thousands and thousands of people, obviously a whole network of towns, that there aren't more people here who feel how we feel, right? I think it's okay to be disappointed that there's not people for rows and rows and rows behind you. But please know that your presence here this morning matters, that your voice matters. I don't know if you followed Jennifer, but she is a great inspiration to all of us to know just what a difference one person can make, the bravery of one person, the honesty. I met her a few minutes ago and was just really honored and so glad that you're here today. She asked a great question. Where are our local elected officials? Why are they not here? This seems like something that people on both sides of the aisle should be able to agree on, to come together to keep our children safe, to keep our children alive, to at least show up for the conversation, right? To at least be open to that. And I think we can be disappointed there. And so beyond your presence and your voice, it's a reminder that your vote matters, right? And the conversations that we have with people who are not here, right? We can probably think of some friends, some family, maybe some people who believe differently, vote differently, that part of the work of today is not just showing up, because in a way it's easy to be here. We are among like-minded people. But it's a different thing to have those hard conversations with people who see the world differently than us, right? So I want to encourage you to do that. And remember Carly, remember Addysin when you do that. Remember the kids in your lives. I get to do a lot of speaking, college campuses, conferences. I got invited to the White House during the Obama years for a mental health summit. And today or typically I get brought in as the mental health guy. And to Right Love in Her Arms is more than 16 years old now. And for the first 10 or 12 years, I just realized that nobody protests, nobody objects when you talk about mental health. And then I started to learn about how mental health and gun violence relate. Something that doesn't get talked about enough is that more than half of gun deaths are suicides. And we've learned, the evidence, the research shows that access changes everything. So quite simply, if it was harder to get a gun, if it was harder for someone who struggles with a mental illness to get a gun, we would see lives saved. We would see less people lost to suicide. And instead what we see is after every mass shooting, we see people blame mental health and try to shift the focus to only mental health. And obviously I'm an advocate, I am a fan of affordable, accessible mental health care. I am all about that. That's been a big part of my life for coming up on 20 years. So I am all for removing the barriers that exist so that all of us, so that all people can get the mental health care that they need. But the conversation doesn't stop there, because again, we've learned that access changes everything. And so we have to use common sense. We have to elect leaders who are willing to use common sense to make it harder to live in a country, or so that we can live in a country that is not so obsessed with guns, where we quite simply, it was on the artwork for this event, where we are willing to protect kids, not guns, right? And so there's so much information, every town, March for Our Lives, there's so much online, there's so much that has been said. today, red flag laws, background checks, closing loopholes. There are so many simple things that we can do, so many places to start. And part of what we're here for today is to put pressure on the Senate to pass the two pieces of legislation that have a chance to make it through, right? I saw a quote that said it would be a miracle if that passes. And how unfortunate is it that that's the world that we live in? But I think we're here imagining a world when that Addysin and her friends can grow up in, where we have elected officials who are willing to come together, no matter what side of the aisle, to again use common sense to see people stay alive. I am here not as a mental health expert, not only as a community member or a nonprofit founder. I'm mostly here as an uncle, as someone who has 2 little boys in my life who I adore, who go to school here in Brevard County, and who came home from school very recently with some really hard questions for my sister, for their mom, asking about, hey, what happened in Texas? What happened to those kids? Are they okay? And so I'm here for them. I grew up with fire drills, and they are growing up with active shooter drills, right? And it's wild that we somehow live in a moment where there's a narrative that to protect kids means to make sure they don't know that some kids might have 2 dads or might have 2 moms, but it's somehow perfectly okay that they should have to learn how to hide under a desk because someone with a gun might show up, right? So I think it's okay, I think it's time to question some of that. But what does it mean to protect children? And where are our elected officials who it seems like it would be so easy to be open to this conversation? And we're not going to agree on everything, we're not going to agree on every issue, but this seems like one where we can come together. I've even been encouraged recently, I lean left, and by that I mean I kind of go that way. I've been having some encouraging conversations with people who believe differently, with people who voted for Donald Trump, with friends of mine that I grew up with, and feeling like maybe there's a chance for some openness in this moment, maybe there's a chance for common ground. And so I would encourage you just to again lean into those conversations. Be willing to have that. Be willing to maybe, for the first time, Mom, was 4 years ago, was that your first protest? Yeah, so my mom is here. 4 years ago, that was her first protest. And maybe for some of you, this is your first event of this kind. And we're so glad that you're here. It's never too late to start. It's never too late to begin to question things or to start to think differently. So just please know your presence matters. It's encouraging. I don't know about you. I think Jennifer will agree with me. It's been hard to live in Brevard County in recent years. It's been difficult to live in Florida in recent years. It's easy to feel alone. It's easy to feel disconnected. It's easy to wonder if anyone feels how I feel, if anyone sees the world. And so I hope you can look around and remember this moment and be encouraged that there are other people who care. There are other people who feel how you feel, who are moved, who are heartbroken, who are angry, who are frustrated. Remember that your vote matters, and you have influence on how people vote around you, your friends, your neighbors, your family, your coworkers. And so would we be willing to have honest conversations? Would we be willing to have hard conversations? I want to leave you with something I read this morning. There's a congressman in South Florida who is a hero of mine. His name is Ted Dodge. And I got to meet him at an event shortly after the Parkland tragedy and got to get to know him a little bit. And this is what he posted from the rally that's happening in Parkland in South Florida this morning. When they write the history of our struggle to end gun violence, there will be one conclusion. The kids won. That's what today reminds us. The kids will win, and America will be safer because of the leadership of young people. Keep marching, keep fighting for change, and we will keep marching with you. Thank you.
I just have one last thing to say. So with movement building is the process of becoming. And there is so much more that we can talk about. And as a member of this community, you are invited to shape these visions, our guiding theory of change and how that manifests with our work. We may be a small group and our organization is led by young people, but we look to the revolutionary leaders who practice movement building as the process of becoming. Becoming something so much more powerful as a community together, being a leader and taking up the megaphone maybe for the first time, becoming an activist, a change maker, an organizer. I want each of you to look at the person next to you, on the left and on the right, and look at the person behind you and maybe in front of you. Wave at them, give them a smile, because they're going to end up being your teammate in the end of this. We are all here for the same reason, to end gun violence together. And we are going to need each other in times like this. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for being present, and that remember, together, in solidarity, we can put an end to gun violence. Thank you.